Shalom, y'all. In all the years I have preached in these series and from this pulpit, I have to confess that my sermon title for today was the most challenging to conceive because you have invited me to speak on International Women's Day. I was thinking of entitling today's talk, I Am a Man, but that's already been taken. My dear friends, in a nation and world torn apart by conflict and division, it's so good to be back at Calvary with you, Neil, and Amber, Scott, and Paul, and everyone here at this church. Looking out at you in this historic sanctuary, I see a beautiful tapestry of faith. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, a Quaker, Unitarians. Together, you bring to mind an image suggested by the great preacher F. Forster Church. We all stand in the cathedral of the world, he said. In cathedrals, there are a multitude of stained glass windows. Each of us is born into one part of the cathedral. Our parents and grandparents teach us how to see the light that shines through our particular window, the window that carries the story of our faith and heritage. The same light of the one God shines through all the windows of the cathedral, but we interpret that light in different ways through the lenses of our faith traditions. There are many different responses to life in the cathedral of the world. A relativist would say all the windows are basically the same, so it doesn't matter where you stand. A fundamentalist would say, the light of God shines only through my window. And a fanatic, well, he would break all the other windows except his own. Clearly, one of the great Judeo-Christian contributions to the world is the notion that each of our faith traditions and each of us is a refraction of God's light, and that we are in this world not to denigrate or refute each other, but to help each other see the light of God in all humankind. The religious diversity reflected in you today, typical of the deep interfaith relationships characteristic of Memphis, suggests one of the great achievements of our lifetimes. The realization that religious diversity is the will of God. It may have taken the church 1900 years, but whether the Vatican in the 1960s or Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, and other statements ever since, the hope has finally been expressed that the relationship between Christianity and Judaism might someday be one of mutual reverence, that without denying our profound differences, Jews and Christians would seek to help each other in understanding what our faith in God requires of us. I want to suggest today that what our faith in God requires of us may be summed up in 3 words: deed over creed. The Jewish faith in particular is about deed over creed. Judaism boldly professes that what matters most is not that we believe what is right, but that we do what is right no matter what we profess to believe. Why? Because a living faith does not mean preaching God's language. A living faith means being God's language. When I received my doctorate of divinity 2 years ago at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, I returned to the chapel with a window reflecting no better example of what it means to be God's language. The window tells the story of another Hebrew Union College rabbi, Alexander Good, and 3 other World War II chaplains, a Methodist minister named George Fox, a Dutch Reform minister named Clark Poling, and a Roman Catholic priest, Father John Washington. These 4 chaplains from different faiths became what their biographer calls an immortal symbol of brotherhood. As their torpedoed ship, the USS Dorchester, plunged into the depths of the Atlantic in February 1943, these men, a priest, a rabbi, and 2 ministers, gave up their life jackets to passengers who didn't have one. And then, arm in arm, they joined in prayer, comforting each other as they sank together into eternity. The fire and brimstone they preached was not one of eternal damnation, but our common humanity and what it means to live in God's image. The camaraderie of these 4 chaplains was highly unusual in the 1940s. Catholics and Protestants did not mix with each other, and neither mixed with Jews. So to see ministers in the same American uniform of different faiths together as a team was virtually unheard of in 1943. As the ship carrying 900 terrified young soldiers, as that ship was struck by a Nazi torpedo, one young man, Michael, was thrown from the boat, and though injured, he was brought back on to the ship before it sank. Michael hobbled along the starboard side of the ship when he suddenly saw the 4 chaplains. 3 of the chaplains had already given their life jackets to boys who didn't have them. Dan Kurtzman, author of the book No Greater Glory, writes that Rabbi Good, the 4th chaplain, removed his life jacket and knelt beside another wounded man. Michael, the soldier thrown from the boat, watched this scene and was mesmerized. He watched from about 5 yards away the rabbi give the man his life jacket and unlace his boots for the wounded man. The rabbi put the wounded man's unaffected arm through an armhole in the life jacket, and he tied the other side of the life jacket around the wounded shoulder with the bootlaces. When the ship went down, this improvised life preserver permitted the soldier to float in the water and live. Rabbi Good then joined his 3 spiritual brothers, and they started praying together in English, Hebrew, and Latin. Michael said you could hear them. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Adonai Echad. Seeing the chaplains continue to minister to the soldiers as the ship went down was, one survivor said, and I quote, as close to heaven as I ever hope to be. Rabbi Good's efforts to save the wounded man with the bootlaces, Kurtzman concludes, was more than an attempt to rescue one last person. That act symbolized the essence of these chaplains of different faiths. It reflected their aim of saving humanity by ridding it of its inhumanity. Whether you come to God by the way of Torah, the way of Christ, or any other way, shouldn't that be the goal of our faith traditions? The Jewish mission, wrote Elie Wiesel, is not to make the world more Jewish. It's to make the world more human. Are we here to save others for God, or to live lives that are worthy of being saved? The most repeated command in the 5 books of Moses, not cited enough, has nothing to do with belief. Did you know that the most repeated command in the Torah is to remember the widow, the stranger, the abandoned child, and the other most vulnerable members in society? In my reading of the New Testament and Jesus' insistence that we love one another, that seems to be his message too. What matters more, my friends, that we believe what is right, or that we do what is right, no matter what our divergent beliefs may be? God put each of us in this particular place and time to make a difference, which is why the early rabbis taught we are to pray as if everything depends on God, but we must act as if everything depends on us. This Lenten season leads to Easter and Passover, and there's an unforgettable moment in the Jewish Passover home ritual known as the Seder, when we open the door for Elijah the prophet. Jews open the door to teach that maybe this will be the year when Elijah will arrive and announce the transformation of this violent, greedy, hungry, and homeless world that is into the world that may someday be, when there will be no more war and only tears of joy. We call it the Messianic Age. Harold Kushner, in his book Living a Life That Matters, speaks of Harvard Divinity School professor Harvey Cox, a Christian, who witnessed this Elijah custom. Cox was guest at the rabbi's Seder, and he offered the most compelling interpretation this rabbi has ever heard. Cox suggests that when we open the door for Elijah each year, and he's not there, we should realize something very important. He's not coming. And the Messiah is not coming either. We have to be the Messiah. As Kushner puts it, we have to act together to clean up the mess we are making of this world, because nobody else is going to magically appear and do it for us. When we place deed over creed, when we set aside our own interests and give of ourselves generously instead of being our usual selfish selves, then we become the Messiah for somebody, if not everybody. So when Elijah doesn't appear in a few weeks on Passover Eve, instead of saying, we'll just have to pray harder and wait for next year, we, all of us, have to say, if Elijah the prophet isn't here to address the xenophobia, hatred, and deceit, if Elijah the prophet isn't here to take care of the sick, the poor, the least, the last, and the lost, if Elijah the prophet is not going to walk through the door to stop sexual assault weapons in schools, and a childhood poverty rate in Memphis 4 times greater for African American children than for white kids. If Elijah the prophet isn't coming to do something about all that, then you be Elijah. After all, isn't that why God put us here? My friends, even with the deep faith I do have in the afterlife, would I take off my life preserver like Rabbi Good and give it to a total stranger to save his life instead of mine? I honestly do not know if I would. How many of you would do it? Thank God we'll probably never be tested that way. But the heroism of those 4 chaplains, their selflessness, their willingness not only to pay the supreme sacrifice for their country, but for a total stranger, is the kind of religious example we must hold up to the world, not because of their beliefs, but because of what they did because of their beliefs, by making their faith shine through their selfless deeds. Deed over creed. That's what we hope to model at Temple Israel this Monday at 6:30 for the MLK 50 countdown to April 4th. And you are all invited. We may be strong alone in our pew, in our church, or in our synagogue, but we are so much stronger together, especially when our prayers lead to action. Because no matter what window in the cathedral of the world one lives in, every human being is a refraction of God's light. Time to make your light shine. And not because you need God, but because God needs you. Now more than ever. Amen. Please rise for our benediction. From the book of Numbers, chapter 6, the best blessing we know as Jews and Christians and people of faith. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. May the Lord cause his countenance to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai, Yisa Adonai, panav elecha, v'yasem lecha, v'yasem lecha, v'yasem lecha, shalom, shalom. May the Lord lift up his countenance through the refractions of his light, each and every one of you. Together may we make and create and share what our city, nation, and world need more than ever. Shalom, wholeness, harmony, completeness, and peace. And let us say, Amen.
Go in peace to love and serve.